Welcome to BioBiz Buzz, the podcast where we look at the trends in the life sciences industry and talk to the movers and shakers who are actually shaping that. I'm Mike Ward, and today we're talking about a deal that really says a lot about where the European biotech industry is in 2026. Gilead's acquisition of the Munich-based Tubulis. It's a big one, up to $5 billion total, with just over $3 billion upfront, for a potentially best-in-class ADC and a seriously powerful platform behind it. European biotech has been through a rough patch on the financing side in recent times, but we're seeing smart, high-conviction M&A again, especially in oncology and modalities like ADCs. Tubulis is a great example of a European company that's gone from academic science to a global reference point. TUB-40 is in the clinic in ovarian and lung cancer. TUB-30 is coming through, and a platform that's already proven it can deliver drugs to tumors in a very controlled way. To dig into what this means for Germany, for Munich's biosphere, and for portfolio companies, I'm joined by someone who's been there from the start of the scale-up story. Dr. Sofia Ioannidou, partner at Andera Partners, the VC which led Tubulis' Series B and has just seen that investment culminate in this deal. Sofia, great to have you here on the show, and congratulations.
Mike, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure.
Great. So let's start simple. When you look at this deal, what's the headline for you? Is it the size of the upfront, the validation of the ADC platform, or the fact that a German private company has become a cornerstone of Gilead's oncology strategy?
I think it's all three. It's the size of the deal, it's the fact that the platform was validated, and also that this is a very strong signal for German innovation. So to take them one by one, the upfront and the total deal value that were paid were some of the largest ever paid for a private biotech company. So this in and of itself is very impressive. In terms of what Gilead actually bought, it was not just an asset and not just two assets that were in the clinic, but they also bought a platform. And this is in a super competitive field where conjugation and linkers are considered by some as commodities. But this deal proves that actually they're not, and that a robust platform can actually create differentiated ADCs, and this is something that the market does put value to. And then last but not least, the fact that a German private company has become a cornerstone of Gilead's oncology strategy is definitely impressive. This is a German university spin-off, spun out from FMP Berlin and LMU Munich. So we're talking about German science, German management also that was progressively also internationalized. And what's even more impressive is that Gilead will actually keep Tubulis as a dedicated ADC R&D organization in Munich. So it will serve as a hub for ADC innovation for the future as well.
Right. So if you were to sort of explain Tubulis for a non-specialist in one sentence, what makes Tubulis special?
I might have to use a bit more than one sentence, but essentially ADCs, antibody-drug conjugates, concentrate chemotherapy to tumor sites by conjugating such chemotherapy to antibodies. And what Tubulis does is it's developed technologies to make extra stable ADCs, concentrating even more chemotherapy to tumor sites with even less chemotherapy in the systemic circulation.
Right. As I sort of mentioned in the introduction, Andera led the Series B back in 2022. So from your side, what has it taken to actually get from that point to signing this multi-billion-dollar deal just 4 years later?
Andera has been there from early on, indeed. We met the company back in 2021. And they had a slightly different business plan. So we worked together with Dominic and the team on defining these strategic priorities. And then we made the investment in 2022. And at that time, the company had in vitro data, very little in vivo data. So it's quite impressive that within 4 years, essentially, the company became a multibillion-dollar company. So what did it take to do this? I would highlight a few things. I'd say that first of all, one needs to make sure that the starting blocks are there from the get-go. And the starting blocks were rigorous science and also a strong vision and ambition of the team. So that was there. Then we made sure that there was good execution, and this was by having also the appropriate resources in terms of talent, but also capital injections at the appropriate moment. So we led the Series B, and then we were there also for the B2 round that happened 2 years later, and the C round that just happened last October. So Andera supported all of them. Another important element of the success, I think, was doing clever BD deals. So the company had 2 deals, 2 strategic collaborations. One was with BMS, and then another one with Gilead. So Gilead, through this collaboration, got to know the company, got to know not only the science, but the people that were behind it, and that led to the acquisition at the end of the day.
And actually, I mean, that's a story that we see quite often where companies will have done a sort of a preliminary sort of, collaboration, and then actually like what they see and decide they're going to make this sort of the full acquisition. I'm just wondering, you mentioned the fact that you clearly, apart from just putting capital, you were also putting in, I guess, intellectual capital, sort of providing advice and guidance to the management team. In your position as a major investor, how much influence did you have on the sort of the structure of this deal? Once you have a buyer like Gilead at the table, does the process pretty much do itself, or are you still heavily involved in structuring the resulting deal?
No, I think the process never really runs by itself. And the investors, of course, had a voice in the process, especially those with significant ownership. So plan A for Tubulis was to be standalone after having raised a very big round a few months ago. And this was a very strong negotiating position that we had. We did not have to do a deal, and we were quite relaxed. And then when the deal came to the table, together with other investors and management, we weighed the trade-offs of each scenario. So the standalone scenario, which would have required an IPO, or the trade sale to Gilead. And we weighted longer-term potential versus cash today, plus earnouts, as well as other parameters. And an important consideration was actually the amount of capital that would have been needed to put behind Tubulis to get the full potential of its product candidates in the clinic and the full potential of its platform, given that the potential was so broad. So at the end of the day, we decided to go for the Gilead offer, which we think was the right decision for the company, for its products, and for the shareholders.
Right. So let's zoom out. What does this deal tell us about German and European biotech more broadly? And do you sort of see this deal as being a one-off, or is it sort of setting a sort of a new benchmark for others to emulate?
Well, I think it's difficult to say that this will now be the bar and the benchmark, but what it tells us is that it's certainly possible for European biotech to command this kind of valuation and have this kind of success. So it does show that if you have genuinely differentiated science, great clinical data, and a top-notch team that can execute, you can absolutely see multi-billion-dollar outcomes in Europe. And I can mention also a few other successes, notably from our portfolio at Andera. We were part of Amolet, Imcheck, also billion-dollar transactions, and then also invested in Abivax, which on the public side has also had a great success. So it is definitely possible, and it does show that for Germany, for instance, Germany can produce world-class biotech, and all the more so that Gilead will actually keep Tubulis as an ADC innovation hub. It's interesting that Daiichi Sankyo had done the same thing with another portfolio company of ours, U3 Pharma, where it kept it as its antibody R&D unit, and that was almost 20 years ago.
Right. And for Munich specifically, Tubulis stays there. It becomes a dedicated ADC research hub within Gilead. And the site obviously anchors a lot of discovery, manufacturing, and clinical activity. So how big is that for the local biosphere?
Very big. First of all, because Gilead should be able to put sufficient resources to scale the company. There's enormous potential for this platform, and being with Gilead, it should get even more resources in order to be fully developed. So not only will the talent be kept, hopefully, but it will also be expanded. And this is great for the local ecosystem. Also, people that have been through this journey and that hopefully will spend time with Gilead, learn best practices, could at some point become future founders, angel investors, or board members. So there can be a spillover effect. And then last but not least, it does put Munich firmly on the map for international investors. This means more company creation from people that had not necessarily focused on this geography before.
Right, sure. And again, we sort of see that venture capitalists do like to back previous entrepreneurs who have, sort of like delivered success. So it'll be interesting to sort of see what Andera is able to do. And so when we sort of think about Andera and the rest of the portfolio, what would you say are the big lessons from Tubulis? I mean, if you're sitting down with another European biotech CEO tomorrow, what are you telling them?
I would tell them that the number one thing to do would be to develop their science well, without cutting corners and focusing on quality and rigor of the science. That's number one. I would also say that it's important to have a differentiated story, and the earlier you find this or are able to articulate it, the better. So they should look for differentiation and competitive advantage of their products or platform. Then very important is also to get the right team around the initial assets in order to secure the execution. And then last but not least, the money part of the equation. So raise money at the right time and raise sufficiently so that you can have optionality.
Right. And that's sort of building that optionality. I guess that's based on sort of the strong data, sort of governance, etc. So when we look at optionality, so whether it's M&A or another fundraising, including an IPO, is there something that executive teams at biotech companies can do to ensure that they are diligence ready, whether it's for an acquisition or an IPO? Is there something specific that they should have invested in?
Well, it comes back to the quality of the data, to make sure that they've done it all in a high quality way, that everything is well recorded and well organized. Comes back to the rigor of the whole process, I would say.
Right. Okay. I mean, looking at sort of like the numbers that are involved, while obviously it's great for the company and for the investors, do you worry that deals like this risk inflating expectations, that everyone now will want to be a billion-dollar company, or at least think they're a billion-dollar company, even if they're not necessarily?
So I think that it's great if people have this ambition, On the other hand, Tubulis was quite a unique company with a mix of a very strong platform, a very rich pipeline, strong clinical data in a hot field. So all the stars were aligned here. I think that it's great to have this ambition, and it can be the upside scenario. And it's encouraging to see that it's possible in Europe, but it might not be the base case for everybody.
Right. Okay, so one last question for me. If you had to give one piece of advice to a European biotech founder who's listening and thinking, I'd love to follow the Tubulis path, what would you say to them?
I would say that it all starts with the science. So quality of science and potential for differentiation should be there from the start. But then again, the science does not go very far without the right people. So surround yourself with great people, and that can lead to success if you have the science part as well.
Well, Sofia, I mean, that's a great place to end. So thanks very much for joining us. And again, congratulations to you, the Andera team, and of course, everyone at Tubulis. So let me try and crystallize the three messages from our discussion. First, world-class assets and platforms absolutely can be built and sold from Europe. The Tubulis story proves that. Second, outcomes like this don't start just in the data room. They start years early with governance, strategy, and that relentless focus on quality that you mentioned. And third, for ecosystems like Munich, keeping those hubs of ADC innovation in place actually will create a potential flywheel that will spin off the next generation of companies. So if you're a founder, an investor, or a policymaker in Europe, that's a pretty compelling call to action. So if you're a European biotech CEO listening to this and on your commute home, here's the headline. You don't need to move your money to Boston or the Bay Area to build something globally relevant. What you do need is the kind of sharp science, clinical discipline, and strategic maturity that we've heard about with Tubulis. And also the courage to surround yourself with partners who will challenge you to reach that bar. Do that, and deals like this will move from fantasy to a very real part of your strategic options. That's it for this episode. So thanks again for tuning in to BioBiz Buzz. If you want to keep informed of future episodes, and be sure to subscribe to BioBiz Buzz using your favorite podcast platform. Sofia, thanks very much for taking the time.
Thank you, Mike.
I'm Mike Ward. Until next time, keep on innovating.